Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back for part 6 of my 2022 library tour. I want 2022 to be the year of the library tour. I want you all to turn on the camera and do library tours, shelf by shelf, no matter how big your collection is or how small it is. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing myself as both a record for myself, a visual record of what my collection is like this year, but also just for the fun of it. And I noticed just as I'm starting this, I'm down in puppy territory. I'm sitting on the floor. I'm sitting on a pillow, and I just noticed as I turned the camera on, this is the most epic video background imaginable. I ought to film all my videos sitting right here. I don't think that's going to happen, but we've got a few shelves to go through today, so we're going to try to do it at a fairly respectable clip. And as I expect you to do in all of your library tours, the very first thing you have to do when you're about to start your library tour for that day is move the ancient Roman gladius. So that's what we're going to do, because I moved this once already. Now I just move it again. So we're going to put that over there. Here we go. And then we'll start with the lateral books that are always managed to end up crammed on top here. So what's the first one? Is a mass market paperback. Oh, great. All right. Names are going to crop up many times. The same names going to crop up many times in this library tour, because there are plenty of authors who are in here multiple times. This is one of them. This is the Roger Lancelin Green. This is a mint condition copy of his book on the Norse mythology, with scraggly line illustrations. There we go. There are the gods and the golden apples of Idun. This is just a terrific retelling of Norse mythology. Just fantastically well done. No problem with ergonomics. If you're sitting on the floor, you have no problem with ergonomics. Then the next lateral book is Arthur Tarbell's book, I Retire to Cape Cod. Just another one of innumerable Cape Cod books that I have. I mentioned yesterday what Cape Cod is, for those of you who might not be up on your American geography. And I love it, dearly love it. And you could easily tell that. I often wonder what you could tell about the person who lives in this room if you didn't know him, if you just knew the books, if you just walked around the books. I think you'd be able to tell that he has a love affair with Cape Cod, because there are a huge number of books about Cape Cod that are in here. This is just an older one. This is someone going back to Cape Cod. This came out in 1944 and had a fairly good run. It was popular on the Cape. It was in bookstores. Then what is this next one? Oh, okay, great. This is a little bit the worse for wear here, but a hardcover volume of The Concord and Merrimack by Henry David Thoreau. His account of journeying all around the Concord and Merrimack rivers. And this is a hardcover edition of a set that was illustrated by Henry Bugby Keene, who's fantastic. Just an incredible illustrator. And if I'm going to tell you that, I should probably show you it, right? His black and white illustrations are all throughout here. Just lovely stuff. Just lovely. Let's get another one. He does full color illustration, or full page illustrations, and also spot illustrations. There he transcribes a very old New England gravestone. There is a water rodent of some kind. and that's what I mean. The spot illustrations all throughout here as well. Lovely set. I know that this publisher who did this, Little Brown, did 3 of these at least, with Henry Bugby Keene specifically conscripted to do the illustrations. And I think I have all 3 of them. Okay, all right. Well, all right. This copy has seen worse days, right? It's stained all over there. It's ragged and whatnot. This copy is bright and clean, and is the same book. I found a copy in better condition, and for some reason I have both of them here, and I shouldn't. But that is another benefit of library tours for me, is that it really helps to clarify my thinking about what books I have and don't have. Let's see here. What is this next one? Okay, all right. This is a naked hardcover with illustrations. This is Robert Means Lawrence. Robert Means Lawrence did Old Park Street and its vicinity. Don't have this with a dust jacket. I know that I would never find it with a dust jacket. This is from the 1930s, I believe. 1922. 1922, and it is There's an old engraving of Park Street a million years ago. This is just about the area of Park Street here in Boston. There's a lot of local history in this room. Again, I think a visitor to this room would be able to tell quite a bit about the inhabitant here. Okay, this next one is the thin little hardcover, The Little World of Don Camillo. Fantastic stories, just fantastic stories about a tough, two-fisted priest in a small Italian village who has his ideas about right and wrong as imparted to him by Jesus, who not only hangs from the crucifix over his altar, but also talks to him on a regular basis. And those ideas of right and wrong are contested on a regular basis by Don Camillo's arch foe, a two-fisted man, usually the mayor of the village, Peponi, who could easily be Don Camillo's twin brother, and is, in the wonderful twist in these stories, obviously Don Camillo's best friend. Just delightful. Absolutely delightful. These are so revisitable. They are just so revisitable. Although I believe The Little World of Don Camillo is the only book of these that I have in a little hardcover. I think I have some in collections here and there, but I'd like all 5 or 6 of these little books in hardcovers. I will find them. The Brattle will provide. Okay, then we have 2 little hardcovers of one of the high priestesses, I almost said, and wouldn't it be justified? One of the high priests of my own profession of literary criticism, and that is Edmund Wilson. This is The Bit Between My Teeth and The Shores of Light. These are collected critical essays of his. The only one that I don't have, there's a kind of a high trinity 3 of these: The Shores of Light, The Bit Between My Teeth, and then one other that I don't have, and whose name is drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank on the name. I wonder if this will tell me. Classics and Commercials is the one in this hardcover set that I don't have. But this is him doing the literary bit. Where he talks about, revisiting a certain author or the latest fad in books. Edmund Wilson graduated pretty quickly from what I do, which is in the trenches, rank and file, individual book reviews. He graduated pretty quickly from that to big, pretentious think pieces. But he's so good that I don't mind. I won't begrudge it to him. This next one's an old one. Oh, right. Okay. This is a book called, who's the author of this thing? I don't even know. And I should, because I'm sure that I know every detail of her biography. She's not printed. Helen Winslow is the author of this book. And this is Little Journeys in Literature. An old leather-bound hardcover from 1902 that I spotted at the Brattle Bookshop. I think it was at the Brattle that I found this. And years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, I found this at the Brattle, and I thought from the title it would be sort of a turn of the 20th century overview of American literature for younger readers. And it turns out wonderfully that it isn't that. Instead, it's a snapshot of literary Boston at the turn of the 20th century and going back 2 centuries before that. This is all about Boston literature. So much fun. So much fun. I will never see another copy of this thing. And so I'm very gentle when I go back to it, because I go back to it quite a bit. The author resurrects the names and the titles and the reputations of a whole bunch of authors who are completely gone. Completely gone. Okay, all right. This is Bliss Perry. We've seen Bliss Perry on this channel. I recently got a few books by this author. This is my favorite one, which is not strictly speaking a history. This is Park Street Papers. And again, as we saw with Park Street and its vicinity, right? This is also about a tiny nucleus of space in downtown Boston proper. Ex-library copy. This is the author's writings about the Atlantic Monthly, back when it was the Atlantic Monthly instead of just the Atlantic, and back when it was headquartered in Boston. And I know that headquarter, that building, backwards and forwards. I know it's been updated and facelifted many, many times, but I know its roots going way back. And this book is a delightful celebration of those roots. The books in this room vary between things that I can universally recommend like Elephant Memories or Onward and Upward in the Garden, and things that this and Little Journeys in Literature is stuff that's so exclusively centered not only on Boston, but on Boston of a century or more ago. I can't generally recommend these things to people, but they are mother's milk to me. I love them. Okay, then we have a volume called Essays Classical by F.W.H. Myers. Essays Classical. This is, I'm trying to get to the table of contents. We have 3 essays in here. One on Greek oracles, one on Virgil, and one on Marcus Aurelius. And I got this volume a long, long time ago, 2006 I got this, mainly for the long essay on Virgil. The long essay on Marcus Aurelius is also very good. The long essay on Greek oracles I could take or leave. But what this is doing in here, I don't know. Because these are still literary critical essays. And there's a bookcase for those out in the other room. I don't love this enough to have it in here away from those. So this is another real fringe benefit of doing a library tour, is that I get to see what belongs in here and what doesn't. Because space in this tiny little book room is at a premium. And this tiny little book room is not as small as my book rooms have been. I've had them much smaller. One in particular that I had that was basically an exaggerated closet underneath the stairs. Like out of Harry Potter, only Harry Potter hadn't been written yet. Absolutely wonderful. So one wall was slanted like this, but it was a tiny space. It had a window, it had a radiator. And that room was less than half the size of this room. I packed it with books, just filled it with books. And I tell you, on a dark, cold winter's night when the snow was blowing and piling up against the side of the house and the wind was rattling the window, to be in that tiny little room under that slanted roof with 6 beagles and 2,000 books was heaven itself. No offense to the baby. This room is just fine, but even so, even though this is twice as big as smaller book rooms that I've had, space is still at a premium. I can't afford to have 2 copies of Henry David Thoreau on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. I can't afford to have literary criticism books in here that belong elsewhere. I can fill up I can free up space by saving these things. Then what? Oh, okay. This is a little brown book. This is the sort of thing you'd only see at the Brattle Bookshop. I must have seen this there. This is 125 years of publishing, commemorative volume made by Little Brown. So a tiny little thing, full of the history of the people who were involved in the publishing house, but of very little interest to the general reader. Okay, whereas this book is a very different story. This is Anne Fadiman, who's in here a couple of times. She's in this room a couple of times. This is a cute little book of hers called Rereadings, where 17 writers revisit the books they love. And I'm not always interested in the books, and I'm not always interested in the writer, but readings like this, books like this, I just love. But this doesn't belong in here. This is still a collection of literary essays about books. And I'm wondering, it's a small shelf that we've got here, and I'm wondering if that's the reason that normal-sized books won't fit on this shelf. I'm wondering if that's the reason. But here we have Onward and Upwards in the Garden, which is relatively a normal-sized book, and it fits on the shelf just fine. What about a completely modern, normal-sized book? Let's take Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, which we saw the other day. Let's see if that fits. Okay, that doesn't fit. A completely normal book, a modern hardcover, does not fit. But what about the Oxford Book of English Verse, the Helen Gardner edition? That does fit, with room to spare. So there is no reason for these. If that's the reason that I originally thought, that this shelf is full of these tiny books because they're tiny, that's not true. And this shouldn't be here. But it's delightful. This next one has no job. Oh, right. Okay. This is George Hamlin Fitch. This is Comfort Found in Good Old Books. This is a collection of literary reflections on Homer and Dante and the Bible and Boccaccio and whatnot by a journalist, book writer, a frequent book writer on the West Coast, I believe, who had just recently lost his son unexpectedly, and who had routinely called his son his best friend and searched for the comfort that books can provide, and writes about those books as a series of discovery essays. Very, very moving stuff. Very, very good. Especially more moving the more you know about... see, I'm putting the books back on the shelf, even though I have been yelling and screaming at you that half of them don't belong here, but I will fix it. Okay, this next one is another Myers, but it's not the same guy. It's a century later. This is B.R. Myers, a Readers Manifesto, an expansion of an article that he wrote for, was it The Atlantic? Yes, he wrote an article for The Atlantic in the 90s, I think, savaging modern literary fiction, what we would now call modern literary fiction, savaging it, ripping it to shreds. And it was delightful. I read it and loved it. It was gleeful. It was a dancing in blood puddle kind of thing. And he expanded it a little and made a little book out of it, which is delightful. I go back to this all the time. He kills and sacrifices a large herd of sacred cows in this book, and it's so wonderful to see. And he does it with such glee and dexterity that a lot of people thought maybe he was me. He is not me. B.R. Myers is not me. I'm not him. He has a completely different history. It's just he also, like I, grew outraged with the fact that he could see that the emperor had no clothes and was still winning the National Book Award. Okay, this next one is also really small. This is Volker Kriegel, The Truth About Dogs. A tiny little thing about it's just one cartoon after another about what dogs do, what dogs are like. Dogs really love to eat socks. There's one in here. I'm never going to be able to find it at short notice, but it's my favorite one, and the reason why is because when I first got this book, it was extremely personal. It felt extreme. Oh, there it is. That is the picture, and the subtitle is "Dogs Fart." And I can attest, they do. When I got this book originally, when I found it at a used bookstore, I had a fat basset hound, and oh my, you have not experienced a doggy fart until you've experienced one that you can hear coming for an hour, working its way down the drainage pipes for an hour. So by the time it gets to the open air, you know it's going to be nuclear level. Okay, this next one is a Dude Bro classic, much like The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and the reason it's in here is very similar. This is The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. I wrote a long essay about Boethius, had a great deal of fun writing about Boethius, and the reason why this book is in here is because it has a blurb by yours truly. We have a blurb by John Wilson and a blurb by me for this particular David Slavitt translation of The Constellation of Philosophy. A very cute little book, very cute little edition that I have never seen in hardcover. I got the advance copy from the publisher back in, I don't know if this is even going to tell me. I got the advance copy from the publisher and reviewed it, wrote about it, and then I didn't get the finished copy, and then I learned through the grapevine that I was on the paperback, so I went and got a copy of that. Then we have Samuel Pepys, the great diarist Samuel Pepys, who's had many, many, many editions. Scholars come out with an edition of Pepys all the time, to the extent that those editions are distinguished by the name of the scholar. So-and-so's Pepys, so-and-so's Pepys, so-and-so's edition of Pepys. And that is the emphasis behind this particular edition of Peeps, which is everybody's Peeps, with illustrations by E.H. Shepard, who is famous for his illustrations of Winnie the Pooh. And this is an abridgment of Pepys that is by far my favorite one. Pepys wrote, his diaries are very, very entertaining, but they are sporadic. There is reading myself to sleep. They are sporadic because not all of them are as good as, not all of them are as interesting as any others. So I have bigger Peepses. I don't have an unabridged, but I have bigger editions of Peeps, more generous selections, more critically annotated versions. But this is the one I go to because you don't really need critical annotation to like Peeps. I'm going to move on to the next shelf here because we're trying to cover ground. I'd like to do all three of these shelves. There are 3 shelves in front of me. I'd like to do all 3 of them today. And get that out of the way, so I'm not spending all my life down here on the floor. So what is this next one? Okay, this is Paul Taylor and W.H. Auden. This is a translation that they did. They dedicated it to Tolkien, and this is the Elder Edda, a selection from the Elder Edda. Very, very good stuff. Very, very good volume of the, a treasure trove of Norse mythology. That I had the mass market paperback of this thing forever and ever, and the mass market paperback that was made by Random House was terrible. Just terrible. One of those stiff things that doesn't want to open and that is threatening you with popping pages all the time. And I just hoped that someday I would find a hardcover. I didn't expect to find one in relatively perfect condition, but the Brattle will provide. This next one has a Mylar dust jacket on it. Oh, great. Okay. This is, again, an author who should be all together. We've seen him many times so far. This is Robert Finch, again, writing about Cape Cod. Another volume of his about Cape Cod, Death of the Hornet. So that's, 3 Robert Finch volumes so far that we've had here? I think there are 2 more to go, so that's ridiculous. And there are plenty of others. There are plenty of other Cape Cod authors who are in here, scattered all over instead of with each other. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. Well, I talk about a general, universal recommendation. This is T.H. White's The Once and Future King, which I have a trade paperback of. I've had many, many mass market paperbacks of it. This is the story of Arthur, only beautifully, beautifully, beautifully told. This is one of the great fantasy epics of all time. And the only fantasy epic that I actually like better than The Lord of the Rings. This is just, it's wiser, it's far, far more eloquent. And it seems always like there are more stakes involved, even though the stakes aren't as ultimate as in Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, we are given to believe that the stakes are, what does Gandalf say? Darkness without hint of light. We're given to believe that. It's kind of an illusion that's kind of shattered at the end when we learn what Sauron, the Lord of the Rings, actually wants. And it's territory. He wants land. It doesn't seem as grotesque as no, it would be, but because he'd have the one ring, so he'd have the territory of people's minds and hearts as well. But here, there's far less at stake. A kingdom. But oh man, Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot are portrayed here as in no other piece of literature. And I satisfied myself with paperbacks for a long time. Then I eventually realized I just have to have a hardcover to go back to often. There's probably a really nice ornate edition of this, Folio Society or something like that I have never seen. But this will do. This will do for me. Oh, great. Okay. This is a YA book before they were really called that, but it's endlessly, endlessly enjoyable. This is Farley Moat's Owls in the House. Farley Moat knew for, Never Cry Wolf and A Whale for the Killing and whatnot, but this is just a slim kids book about a family that adopts a couple of owls and the antics that the owls get up to. It ends in a really really wonderful way, because there we have an owl overlooking the duties of the farm, but he ends the book in a way that all YA authors should end their books, I think, or in a more innocent age before YA was full of sex and F-bombs. A note from the author: were Wall and Weeps real owls? Of course they were. And Mutt and Rex and Murray and Bruce and I were real. And if you should happen to be going to Saskatoon in the spring of the year and you should happen to take a walk across the prairie, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if you happen to meet some of us. And if it's a big white owl and a not so big brown owl you meet, give them my love. Will you? Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, let's not cram that in here. Oh, okay, this is Beverly Nichols. Boy, this is in rough shape. Down the Garden Path, a book about gardening. Because the one permanent upshot of my flirtation with making a garden years ago here, I didn't actually do it because, to quote the New Yorker cartoon, it involved a lot of stooping. but I didn't actually do it. I may in the coming spring. I always hope is eternal. But the one permanent effect of that plan was that it turned me on to gardening books, to gardening literature. I buy lots. I read whenever I see anything that's any kind of literary bent about gardening in the used bookstores. I grab it and read it. And this was so good that I brought it in here. That's 2 gardening books that we've seen in here. Okay, William Bolitho is next. This is 12 Against the Gods. From, again, I think the 1940s. 1929. And this is a collection of profiles of Alexander the Great, Casanova, Christopher Columbus, Muhammad, Lola Montez. That name's forgotten. Cagliostro, Napoleon the First, Napoleon the Third, Isadora Duncan, Woodrow Wilson. He picks a whole bunch of these people and writes profiles of them, and they are so energetic. They are so enjoyable. Then we have a fat little old. This is old. My, it's well illustrated. This is from the 1920s, probably. No, 1908. This is 1908. This is Mary Carolyn Crawford, and this is St. Botolph's Town, an account of old Boston in colonial days. Lovely thing with the gold gilt still intact after more than a century, and I love these kinds of old Boston histories. And because I have access to the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston, a great used bookstore that goes out buying in houses and estates all over Massachusetts, I see lots of these things. So I never fail to grab them, these old Boston histories, because the further forward that you go in time, the more granular detail the authors are going to leave out, right? There was a big fat history of Boston just a couple of years ago. It was really, really good, but doesn't have almost all the names that are in here or in that little, what was it, Little Journeys in Literature. Almost all the names that are in older books like this are absent from those larger sweeping histories because there just isn't room. So the older histories with those names and character studies and whatnot are of great interest to me. I love the city of Boston. This next one is a modern library. Oh, great. Okay, this is a big fat modern library edition. We saw Bullfinch's Mythology, and here we have a big fat modern library of Mallorys Les Morts d'Arthur, which had an ugly, stupid cover, and I substituted King Richard on the cover for the ugly, stupid cover that it had. I like that better. And again, to publishers everywhere, my services are available for a very modest fee. I can fix the crappy covers you are foisting on the reading public on a regular basis. But this is a cloth bookmark of Warrington? No idea why that comes. This is Mallory's great book that is endlessly mined. It's endlessly quarried. Mallorys Les Morts d'Arthur is a source for a lot of Arthurian stuff. But I worry that a lot of people read the source stuff that's quarried from it. They don't read the book itself. The book itself has a very odd, stilted diction. You have to get used to that. Once you do, what a book. What a book. Okay, this is David McCord. This is another 1948 about Boston. So this is another old Boston book that gives you a snapshot of the Boston of its day that may or may not be gone. Large parts of it will be gone. This book would have been written right as or even before a massive highway reconstruction that was designed to refigure the entire face of Boston for the 20th century. And that entire project, massive highway with all the off-ramps and arterial diversions there, the leveling a whole neighborhood, that whole project has now been leveled in a gigantic project from 20 years ago called the Big Dig that removed that highway and undid a lot of that damage. So an ever-changing city, and these books really capture that. This kind of book. Okay, this is an author we've already seen. This is where have we got it here? Arthur Wilson. This is Arthur Charville. We saw I Retired to Cape Cod. Here's another one of his books, but it's an ex-library copy, Cape Cod Ahoy, where he writes about Cape Cod. And all I have is an ex-library copy. I've never seen this book, just for sale with a dust jacket. I'd grab it if I did. Okay, all right. This next one is also an ex-library copy. This is Joseph Allen's book, Tales and Trails of Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off the coast of Massachusetts that I also know to a fairly well. I know it deeply, deeply, every detail of it. And am now a regular book reviewer for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. This is just this is from, again, I want to say the 1940s, 1938. This is just old stories of the vineyard. Fantastic. This next one is yet another ex-library copy. Okay. This is William Stearns Davis, and this is A Day in Old Rome, where he just takes you through everything to do with banks, books, libraries, shops, baths, the street, safety, all that sort of stuff. Just a snapshot of Rome, I think, in the late Augustan era. So a long period of peace where things would have been relatively the same for a whole lifetime. Then, what is this next one? Barely anything on you. Okay, this is Augustine Birrell. We've seen him before. Not all of his books are together, but we've seen him before. Here he is. First we saw Etc. Of his, and this is another book of his. This is Oberdicta, in passing. Just another collection of literary essays that, here's the bookmark here, in celebration of the Women of Holy Cross. No idea why this is here. These are just straightforward literary essays. I have a bookcase for straightforward literary essays. So they all just need to go out in that bookcase. But we're gonna forge forward. We're at the 30-minute mark. We're gonna forge forward, try and get this last shelf done. Okay, this next one is, again, a literary anthology. So again, it doesn't really belong here. Although I like this one so much, I probably would keep it in here. This is by Van Wyck Brooks, who we've already seen. And this is a Chilmark Miscellany, where he just writes about, has blurbs from, oh, good Lord. the blurbs on the back are from Henry Seidel Canby, not a name that you will know, but a huge name at the time. Lewis Mumford, also not a name you will probably know, but a huge name at the time. Then Malcolm Cowley, one of the biggest literary poobahs of the day, and Edmund Wilson. Fantastic. So this has bits from his journal. This has pieces on Edgar Allan Poe and John Muir and John Keats, and it's a collection of literary pieces that Van Wyck Brooks wrote for deadlines or for friends who were editors or whatnot throughout the decades. Okay, next one's a fairly recent acquisition, fairly recent addition to this room. This is Ralph Dutton's book, The English Country House. Lovely thing, that has the full illustration there instead of chatter on the back. That's just a big painting. This is from the Face of Britain series. I have a few of these. This is on English country houses, which I love. It's a subject that I love. And I have quite a few... Oh, there's very famous English country house. I have quite a few books on English country houses in this room because I love to go back to them. I go back to them all the time. But they, again, are not together. That's very annoying. Okay, now we have our second copy of Brideshead Revisited. But this is the companion to the Granada TV show. It's just a companion volume. It's battered to pieces because I've had it ever since then. I got it in bookstores when that show was premiering. That has our trio of main characters on the front, and then some characters on the back when they are older. There's Laurence Olivier as Lord Marshmain, and I love this novel, but this is the second copy that we've seen just in this library tour. I don't think there are any others in this room. I may have one or two mass market paperbacks, but I don't think there are any other copies in here. This is an old trade paperback of God, Emperor of Dune, my favorite of the Dune books, with these surreal old science fiction-y covers. The publisher, who did this? Berkeley? Who did this? Berkeley, yes. Berkeley did Dune and Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune. I think they did 4 of these things, or maybe 5, with these cover illustrations. They don't hold together well. This is heavily reinforced and still cracks like popcorn every time I open it. But I got rid of all the others. So I couldn't bear to get rid of this one because I read not this particular copy, but this particular edition. I read God Emperor of Dune until it fell apart. Loved it so much. I have much more sturdy editions nowadays, but still. Okay, then we have Natural History, great Natural History. This is Natural Acts by David Quammen. This is not the original paperback. The original paperback had a crow on the cover because this has the famous essay in it, Has Success Spoiled the Crow? But this is just a collection of natural history pieces that David Quammen wrote. Now he writes books, and also reviews and long pieces and whatnot. A great naturalist, just fantastic naturalist. But this was very early on in his career of publishing. And it is great, even when I disagree with him. There's a piece in here about dogs that has a lot of stuff in it that I disagree with, but glad to have this. Okay, now we're going to make up some time here. Fantastic. Because now we have a stack of the same thing. We have a stack of Rumpole of the Bailey, a great old creation of John Mortimer. So we have the collected stories of Rumpole in this Penguin Classic, the modern classic. Then we have the Trials of Rumpole, with these great old covers. So you have the gun, you have the portmanteau clock, you have the Oxford Book of English Verse, and then we have the modern hardcovers that Mortimer did once a year, very late in his life. Rumpole was thoroughly a creature of short stories for a long, long time, decades. And then Mortimer decided to write little novels, and I had nothing but foreboding, and they are wonderful. They are all wonderful. So I have the whole set of those little novels. So we have Rumpole and the Primrose Path. We have Rumpole and the Reign of Terror. Look at those great illustrations there. We have Rumpole rests his case. Don't you believe it? Talk about someone who's like that postscript in Owls in the Family, where somebody's just going to be going on forever. Then Rumple Misbehaves, which has at its heart social order legislation in Britain. Are you making an annoyance of yourself? A very hot topic, considering the bill that is law, or going into law in the UK right now, that effectively prohibits protest. It's one of the largest infringements on the right of free speech that the modern UK has ever seen. And because the whole country was caught up in the turmoil of Boris Johnson's Christmas parties last year, which is not a small story, he imposed rules on his own country that caused misery from one end of the country to the other, while he was, it's clear, completely ignoring those rules, going to party after party. That's a big story. That is important. But while that has been gathering everyone's attention, this legislation has been going through that makes Britons less free than they have ever been. And that's at the heart of Rumple Misbehaves. And finally, Rumpole and the Penge Bungalow Murderers, where John Mortimer decides finally to address the giant rat of Sumatra. In the Sherlock Holmes canon, Watson makes passing reference to a whole bunch of stories that he's never written up of his friend, the world's greatest amateur consulting detective, Sherlock Holmes. And one of them involves the giant rat of Sumatra, and we never learn that story. Arthur Conan Doyle means it only as an illusion. He doesn't ever write it up. And forever and ever in Rumpole's stories, Rumpole is a battered old Bailey barrister. He lives off the rich pickings of legal aid, and he has very little in the way of respect from his colleagues or the judges that he goes up against in court. But he never pleads guilty, and he's very, very good. And in the course of those adventures, of those short stories over the decades, he makes frequent reference to the fact that he earned his place in notable British trials because he won the Penge Bungalow case alone and without a leader. As a fairly junior barrister, he won it alone. And that reference comes up over and over again in Rumpole's stories. And Mortimer decided finally to tell us the story of the Penge Bungalow murders. A very young Rumpole. You can see the advocate there is very young. His wig is still white. And it was delightful. That's the thing about these cute little hardcovers, is that they are absolutely delightful. They're as delightful in their own way as the canonical short stories. So, and I have written about Rumpole. Publisher came out with, I don't think it was this one. I think it was The Best of Rumpole, a volume called The Best of Rumpole that I'm not sure that I have. I think Viking came out with that volume years and years and years ago, and I tentatively, gingerly brought it up to an editor of mine on the other side of the world, writing for a paper in Abu Dhabi, thinking, that he would shoot it down right away. But it turns out my editor was an expat Brit and was over the moon about the idea. Let me write about Rumpole to my heart's content. So I ran a piece there. I got a chance to write about Rumpole on deadline for pay before the whole subject went away. Rumpole, I'm sure, will fade out of print now that John Mortimer is gone. He's not writing new books. There's no TV show. There's no movie. There's no nothing like that. So I was very happy for that chance. Then we have Robert Sapolsky's big book, Behave. This is the Orange Spine Penguin trade paperback. This is a fantastic book. I don't know that I'm blurbed on it. I'm probably not blurbed on it. I don't want to waste the video looking to see if I am, because it has a million blurbs. And the reason, it doesn't look like I am, but the reason why it has a million blurbs is because it's incredibly good. All about what makes you you. Neurologically, biochemically, and also personally. Just one of those omnium gatherum books, like The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins, where there's something great on every page. A revelation, an eye-opening light bulb moment on every page. then the next one, we are going to be able to do this fairly expeditious. We've only got 2 more books to go. This next one is from 1905. This is by Frances Marion Crawford, who I believe we've already seen. I think we've already seen Frances Marion Crawford already here in this room. I'm not going to go looking, though, because that will eat up time. This is Salve Venetia. It's an old book about Venice that's full of lovely drawings behind their onion skin protectors. Just lovely. This is just glimpses of Venice through history, through time, and also through neighborhoods. And it also is a recurrent theme in this room. I deeply loved Venice. I lived there for a while. I didn't just visit. I wasn't just a tourist. I stayed for all 4 seasons and loved it deeply, more than any other place except Boston. And I realized a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that I'm never going to go back. I'm never going to see Venice again. And that has sparked a whole bunch of books. I've got a whole bunch of books on the subject. We've seen a bunch of them. We saw William Dean Howells's book, Venetian Life, and there are plenty of others. Venice will be popping up again in this book tour. And then the last one. See, so we got this in under 45 minutes for this one, and then I don't have to sit on the floor with my whole nether regions going numb. This next one, I think, was sent to me by one of you, an enormously generous gift. This is the illustrated version of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Unfinished Tales. The illustrations by Alan Lee. Let's get an illustration. This is, look at that, delightful. Is that the Fall of Gondolin? Is that what that is? This is, I'll get you another illustration here. This is, oh, how lovely. Look at that. Just great. This is, I had the mass market paperback for The Unfinished Tales, and I think I had a trade paperback for a long time, but this is one of these heavy-duty, deliciously ornate editions of a thing that I go back to all the time. I go back to the Silmarillion and The Unfinished Tales a lot. Not as often as I do The Lord of the Rings itself, but plenty. So if you're watching and you sent me this volume, thank you very much. This is a weird parasocial relationship that we have going here, but it never ceases to honor me. So I'm very grateful. And that is it. That is part 6 of our 2002 library tour. Plenty of library tours, I'm hoping, will be cropping up on BookTube in 2022. But that's it for this. Next time, we're going to go from puppy territory, from me going numb on the floor, all the way to the sky. We're going all the way to the sky for the next one. How I'm going to do that, I do not know. But I'll take you along for the ride. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.